Hello, good evening and welcome to Joy News Prime, coming to you live from our studios here in Kokomlemle, Accra. We're live on DSTV channel 421 and GoTV channel 125. Around the world on myjoyonline.com. My name is Samuel Kojo Brace.
And I am Faustina Safo. Tonight, the University of Ghana chapter of UTAG slams the Auditor General, media and the Ghana Tertiary Education Commission demanding immediate clearance to recruit at least 1,500 lecturers to improve staffing and quality of education.
We ask, why isn't GTEC insisting that the government gives clearance to recruit more faculty members to maintain a reasonable student-lecturer ratio?
Also coming up tonight, concerns arise over sustainability of AMA's major crackdown on pavement traders amid history of failed decongestion efforts in the last 20 years.
Also tonight, we would have details of the Director General of the Ghana Standards Authority as he reveals that many ECG meters in use domestic households and industry have not been calibrated.
Plus, fresh data from the Energy Commission revealing that the ECG challenges continue to deepen, with power sale losses surging to over 30% in 2024. Remember, we are a home of independent, fearless and credible journalism.
It's a good time to take a seat and please be our guest.
Well, the University of Ghana chapter of UTAG has launched a scathing attack on the Auditor General, Multimedia Group and the Ghana Tertiary Education Commission, GTEC. They've demanded the Auditor General's removal, citing incompetence, and criticized Ghanaian journalism standards.
UTAG is also urging the government to approve the recruitment of some 1,500 new lecturers to replace departed faculty members, warning that the refusal to do so is severely undermining tertiary education quality. They accuse GTEC of neglecting its core mandate, prioritizing revenue-driven accreditation over advocating for adequate staffing. Well, my colleague Blessed Swega was at that news conference and he'll be joining us briefly here on Joy News Prime as we look at some of the key details in that Auditor General report and the concerns that UTAG is raising tonight. Well, Blessed, let's start with the key allegations being made by UTAG. First of all, they take on the Auditor General. They want his immediate removal. Why exactly?
That's precisely the case, because they are unhappy basically with the audit findings. Now, they start off with the concerns on the publication itself, which emanated from the multimedia group here. And the basic source of our information was the Auditor General's report, which was earlier transmitted to the Speaker of Parliament earlier this year in February. Now, fast forward in May, our research team actually chanced on that report and quoted details of the report, pointing out that the University of Ghana had overstated its payroll audit details by over 50 million Cedis. That's a substantial amount, a reason for which our reporter, true to the spirit of independent, fearless and credible journalism, actually put out the details. But now we know what the figures are, but the lecturers appear to be unhappy with what the findings are. And that's why we're where we are today with UTAG, UG, calling for the resignation of the Auditor General.
But be it as it may, this report is not an isolated incident. It sits within the job that was done by the Auditor General. This report, as distasteful as it is simply predicated on the poor job that was done by the audit service. The standards of auditing, in our opinion, has plummeted in recent years, and if care is not taken, would have serious consequences for the nation. It appears to us that the audit service is more interested in appearing to be working rather than doing the right thing. And in so doing, they ignore ethical standards that guide their profession. University of Ghana management maintains that the initial audit report was not shared with them for them to make comments and clarify any discrepancies before this was made public. This is grossly unfair and unethical. This is a serious breach of the ethical standard required for the audit service and its profession. And for the Auditor General to sit in his office and preside over such an institution that disregards ethical standards and standard practice, we are hereby calling for the resignation of the Auditor General honorably, or we will petition the President for him to be removed. We do not say this because we have personal issues with the Auditor General, but we believe that the audit service, or auditing in general in this country, has become a tool for intimidating and disallowing legitimate payments, especially to subvented institutions in Ghana. We also want to state that the situation where auditing has been used as a tool to disallow payment of legitimate claims from subvented institutions must stop with immediate effect. And I'm going to cite one example of such indiscretionary use of power.
The university is also attacking GTAG, their regulator. Why exactly?
Clearly because of what they see to be neglect, basically because they believe that there are teething challenges within the public tertiary space, specifically if you're looking at the premier university space, which is the University of Ghana. Student-to-teacher ratio woefully inadequate, a reason why they feel that the IGF was used, for instance, in sorting out the issues of payment for teachers, a reason they want the Auditor General gone, because that money was dedicated to solving issues of the gaps and the shortfall in staffing. But beyond that as well, they now want GTAG to address these concerns and not monetize their power of accreditation and just adding on to programs instead of dealing with some of these challenges. So we can once more listen to leadership of the group address that.
For the University of Ghana, for example, it is the innovation and the resilience of management that has kept it above the water. The decision to continue engaging retiring professors and individuals to maintain a decent student-teacher ratio is something that we believe should be commended, rather than they being chastised for it. So we ask, why isn't GTAG insisting that the government gives clearance to recruit more faculty members to maintain a reasonable student-lecturer ratio? Right? In all public universities. When institutions appear to falter on GTAG regulations, GTAG is so quick to go after them. And as we speak, accreditation of courses has become nothing but a money-making venture by the Commission, rather than a legitimate quality assurance exercise. And therefore, for public higher education institutions, and even private ones, monies obtained through IGF are siphoned back to GTAG through payment for accreditation fees. And yet, my dear colleagues, the responsibility on our shoulders continue to pile up. And no one seems to care, including the regulator, who has set standards that wants everybody to meet.
Well, the university teachers launched an attack on the multimedia group for carrying this particular story, publicly accusing the outlet of, quote, lowering journalistic standards, unquote. There is our editorial's stance on this.
Claim that they had been giving clearance to employ a number that will not deliver on quality, education quality in the university, and that it will not help with the teacher-student ratio, right? And so they had to bring in, as they explained, lecturers who are retired and put them on the IGF and pay them there. And the Auditor General audited it and put them together and reported it as being disallowed and savings made because they had overstated what the government of Ghana had given them clearance to employ. That is the Auditor General's finding, and that is what we simply reported. So where have we gone wrong? But I come back to the point I made earlier. The only good thing about this is that the individuals speaking, both the university management, I don't know who signed it, and the
lecturers.
The lecturers, the union, they are not journalists. So we can pardon, they don't understand the way we operate. They had made a point there that it is the standard that you have to check with the individual against him an allegation. The person who must do that and is obliged to do so, as far as the ethics and the professional dictates of the profession is concerned, called auditing, is the Auditor General. And the Auditor General, in his methodology, told us in this report that they have evaluated management letters that had been issued and came to the conclusion. So what's the point there?
Well, government is pushing back strongly against former Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia's claim that the recent Cedi appreciation has nothing to do with government policy. Government says the Gold Board initiative introduced earlier this year is the real driver behind the Cedi's gains. However,
Dr. Bawumia believes the credit belongs to the previous government, and there's more in the following report.
The Cedi has seen a 16% appreciation against the US dollar since January, a feat of applause and controversy. While the NDC government says this is the result of strong fiscal policy, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia is challenging that narrative. Speaking in London during his thank you tour, Dr. Bawumia rejected what he called misplaced credit being given to the Mahama administration.
One of the things that if you ask a simple question to the NDC to point out exactly what policy they have implemented that has resulted in the appreciation of the Cedi, they cannot tell you one.
But government is not having it. Deputy Finance Minister Thomas Ampim-Yankun has rejected Dr. Bawumia's claims, describing them as unfounded. It points to the establishment of the Gold Board as a game-changing intervention that reduced forex pressure and boosted investors' confidence.
Today, with the introduction of the Gold Board and the way we have channeled all the export through the Gold Board, we have accumulated and exported in excess of $2.7 billion worth of gold. This has been the game changer.
President John Mahama earlier credited the collaboration between the Finance Ministry and the Bank of Ghana for economic turnaround. Waliwali MP and Member of Parliament's Finance Committee, Dr. Kabiru Mahamatia, insists it is the MPP's groundwork and not the Gold Board that deserves praise.
But there was no Gold Board in January. There was no Gold Board in February. Gold Board came in somewhere the latter part of March. That means that they cannot be attributing it to the Gold Board. Gold Board has only been in operation for only a month. There was already a system in place for the purchase and export of gold. That is the Precious Mineral Marketing Company. Gold Board only comes in to take the whole monopoly, right? And that is the difference. So no one should dare say Gold Board.
Professor Williams Kwesi Prepra of the Andrews University attributes the Cedi's strength to a combination of factors.
We've noticed that the central bank within the last 4 months has pushed a lot of foreign currency into the economy, which is a government policy they have decided to do. And it's one of the reasons why there is more supply of foreign currency in the market and causing a reduction. They have used a policy to make sure that lending to the central bank gives you a higher interest in a shorter period than to go and buy treasury bill.
The numbers may speak for themselves, but the interpretation is political. So, is it the NDC's gold-backed policies or the continuation of MPP's era reforms?
Well, Dr. Bawumia also claims that the NDC, since they took office, hasn't added even a ton to Ghana's gold reserves. And we've been fact-checking that claims. And joining me now is the newly married lead data analyst here at Joy News, Kofi AJ. Kofi, what's the verdict?
Well, firstly, the verdict is clear, and the claim is that, look, the current NDC administration hasn't even added a ton of gold to the country's gold reserve, which means the vice president claim is that at least if you should not add anything at all, you should be able to add a ton to the reserve. So how did we do this? We've been combing through data from the Bank of Ghana, trying to understand where we are as a country in terms of gold reserves. And what we understand is that the claim made by the former vice president, if we are to put the true meter to it, then we can confirm that this claim is true. Why do we say so? Look at between December and April of 2025. The NDC actually took over in January 7, 2025. If we do the math, even if we possibly give all the gold added to the reserve between January and April, that's about 0.84 tons. That's not even up to a ton. So his claim that the NDC hasn't even added a ton to the country's gold reserve, we can confirm that this claim is true.
But we also know that the Cedi has been performing creditably well for some time now. What then is attributing to it? Because you've been going through the data behind it.
But currently, we don't know who should take the credit. But what we know is that this was actually the IMF program is supposed to bear. These are some of the fruit that the IMF expects from the 3-year program that we are running. A pair of checks using summary data from the Bank of Ghana. What we can confirm is that one thing that was falling is now rising, which is cocoa export revenue. And we understand that this year we are not doing the forward sales. And so if you look at cocoa revenue in the first 2 months of the year, we are getting in excess of $800 million from cocoa revenue in just 2 months. If you take a look at another sector, which is remittances, what we understand per articles being written by Dr. Tuahine was that a chunk of the remittances that were supposed to come into the country wasn't actually coming into the country. And we understand that this governor, or this current governor, when he was actually sworn into office, the first thing he did was to do a validation exercise of the remittance to block the leakages. And in 2024, looking at the data from the Bank of Ghana, $6.6 billion is the total amount of remittances that actually flowed into the country in 2024. We can actually talk about the fiscal spending or the fiscal discipline of the current government, which they said that looking at how they are borrowing from the T-bill market at a very low rate, they're actually able to control their expenditure. So a number of factors, including reserve, that's actually increased. In fact, if you look at or do the math with this 31.3 tons of gold, that means the gold reserve is worth some $2.3 billion that possibly the SY administration added. If you want to do for the NDC, that's about $88 million. So the question is, it's a cocktail of factors. We possibly cannot attribute it to one person, but what we know is that these are some of the good fruit that we are bearing or we are getting from the IMF program.
Okay. All right, Kofi, do stay with us because we need to have you on this next story, which has to do with the Director General of the Ghana Standards Authority, Professor Alex Dodu, raising concerns over the reliability of electricity meters currently in use across the country.
Well, speaking at a stakeholder conference organized by the International Electrotechnical Commission, Professor Dodu indicated that many of the ECG meters have not been calibrated, raising red flags about its effectiveness in revenue generation and energy management. Well, these concerns came to light today when the Electricity Company of Ghana, we are told, is already under intense public scrutiny over erratic power supply and operational losses. We'll hear from Professor Dodu shortly, but we still have Kofi in the studio, and you've been exploring the fresh data from the Energy Commission on ECG's power sale losses surging to over 30% in 2024. Tell us more.
In fact, what that data means is that per every 100 Cedis that ECG get to sell as power, they actually loses about 32 Cedis. It means that if ECG procures 100 Cedis worth of power to sell, they are not able to account for some 32 Cedis. And
that will be 32%.
32% or that of what they procured versus what they are able to sell. And we've been looking at this data from 2000 to 2024, and we can see that stratospheric rise in ECG's sale losses, where they are not able to actually sell what they are supposed to, to sell what they actually procured. This is the chart that we are using to tell the story, and you can see the widening gap between power, bought versus power sold. Now, this is what ECG is supposed to be selling in total, but they end up selling some 11,561 gigawatts of power, and you can see the gap widening, creating that 32% gap in terms of sale. Now, we've also been looking at ECG versus other distributors. We've been talking about privatization and how this is going to be. This is where ECG is at the moment, 32%. But the key question is is there an entity doing this right, able to reduce their losses? Let's look at that chart. So that tells you that.
Drawing a comparison.
Absolutely. So we decided to compare all the three distributors, ECG, Netco, and the latest one, which is the private one, which is the Enclave Power Company. Okay. Now you can see Enclave Power Company in terms of the losses being below both ECG and Netco. Whilst ECG and Netco are doing somewhere 31% and 26.9%, you can see Enclave doing 0.6% in terms of...
Enclave is private.
Private. So that is where the conversation is now. The president already saying that let's look at the final aspect of the energy distribution and we should be able to privatize that aspect. And he says, if Enclave is able to do it, why can't ECG do it? If Enclave is giving, let's say, 900 megawatts, they are able to sell some, 90% or 95% of. Why is ECG?
But if you look at it, they are doing 99.4.
Absolutely. That's
look at the figure.
That's huge.
Absolutely. That's huge. And you can see the difference between Enclave and ECG and, Netco. Wow. But people are, asking questions. Maybe it's because of the magnitude of the power. If you compare Enclave to ECG. Wow. But the president says that...
But also being competent. We shouldn't rule that out.
Well, let's see that.
Let's see how that goes.
Very interesting analysis there. It makes a case for why private participation should be in the running of ECG. But we can now hear from Professor Dodu, who has been saying that there is a high number of meters which have not been calibrated. The commercial losses could also be high.
The meters, I'm sure I'll be in trouble, but I'll say it. Very few of our meters have been calibrated and verified by the GSA. And if the meter you are using has not been calibrated or verified by the Ghana Standards Authority, as required by LI 2413, its accuracy is something that, is left to. We cannot comment on it. The law says they must be verified and calibrated, and thankfully we are working with the ECG and PURC to be sure that all the millions of meters in Ghana are calibrated and verified by the GSA, the authority given the power to do that. Because without it, consumers cannot say they are protected, industry cannot say they are trading fairly. And I know it's a very thorny issue, but as we support Its Excellency in rolling out the 24-hour economy, it's important that we provide the quality infrastructure that will make the 24-hour economy succeed.
Well, let's bring in George Anti, who is head of enforcement at the Ghana Standards Authority. George, I'm grateful to you for joining. Now, what does an electricity meter not being calibrated really mean?
Right. Thank you very much, my brother, and thank you to, let's say good evening to all your viewers. Put very simply, anything that weighs or measures ought to be able to weigh or measure accurately. So anytime you have a weighing or measuring device or instrument which has not been calibrated and which is not verified from time to time, what it means is that at any given point in time, we may not be able to, as it were, attest or confidently say that that weighing or measuring instrument is measuring or weighing accurately. For instance, you've given the example of electricity meters, and we buy power. Very few people know the kilowatt hours that they are buying. We buy with cash. So we say I'm buying, let's say 200 cedis of power or 100 cedis of power. Now, when you buy that, you expect that it should give you a certain number of kilowatt hours, power a certain number of devices over a certain period of time. But who is checking, really? I'm sure that you've heard over and over again people making complaints that I bought power, tariffs haven't changed, my consumption patterns haven't changed, but the power seems to last for a shorter period than it used to.
Okay.
So what has changed? And we're not able to answer the question. But that could be because your meter is not reading accurately. It happens.
But whose job is it to ensure that the meter I am using in my house is calibrated before I get it?
So there is a law. That is the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, I think Consumer Services LI, of 2020, that's LI 2413. And if you read Regulation 24 of that LI, it mandates the Ghana Standards Authority to approve meters that are to be used for public utility metering. So it's not just energy meters or electricity meters. It also goes into water. So basically, any public utility that you have that is metered, those meters must be approved by the Ghana Standards Authority before it happens.
But
that's the law.
Okay.
So enforcement is a totally different story.
Could this issue then be contributing to ECG's reported operational losses? And to what extent? Because you saw us earlier talk about the losses there. Could this be a contributing factor?
So quite unfortunately, I mean, I am a lawyer. I don't think I'm trained to speak about the engineering aspects of power losses and all of that. But to the extent that we are having discussions about measurements, it is entirely possible that if the instruments we are using to measure are not giving us correct measurements, we will experience some of these problems. So are people being billed more than they are actually using? Or are people being billed less than they are actually using? And if that is happening, the power is being used anyway, but people are being billed less. So who is paying for the rest?
But if it is
entirely possible.
If it is your job to make sure meters that we use in our homes are calibrated and that is not being done, can we then be right to say you failed in the job they've given you?
Well, it depends on how you want to look at it. Like I said before, it's one thing having a law and it's another thing having the law enforced. As we speak now, yes, we have that LI, but the regulator when it comes to public utilities is the PURC. So the GSA, yes, has been given that power by the PURC, but what will the GSA do? Within the ECG's procurement processes and all of that, where has the GSA been put in? I mean, we on our own have initiated discussions with the electricity distribution companies. We've met with ECG. We have taken a step to make sure that there's the infrastructure to do this calibration and verification by partnering with a private sector actor to put up a whole lab from scratch, to undertake this calibration and verification. But within the process, when meters are bought by ECG or by NEDCO or by whichever entity, Ministry of Energy, buys meters, what is the process? And how are we ensuring that the legal requirements are met in that process? So if GSA is not in that process, of course, ECG can procure meters, get them installed by contractors or whoever, and GSA is not in the picture. And really, I mean, what can we do? Do we sue ECG? What do we do? The law is there, but we have to enforce the law. And sometimes these kind of discussions open the way for us to all decide where we want to go as a country.
George, we're grateful for spending some time with us tonight.
Well, let's explore this further and speak to the former board member of the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, Ishmael Ejekumhina. We appreciate your time here on Joy News Prime. We've just been hearing from the Ghana Standards Authority. They're leaving the blame on your doorstep, really. What's your thoughts about what is happening in the system, the losses we're making because of the failure of the authority to calibrate meters before they get to our homes?
So good evening to your viewers. It's the blame is being laid at the doorsteps of the PURC, not my doorsteps. But let me say this, and let me briefly clarify a few things that your earlier colleague, the one who was doing the presentation, I think it will be the comparison between the two bigger distribution utilities and enclave power is not too appropriate because they are distributing power within the free zone enclave, and you see the longer power travels, the more losses that is occasioned. I mean, so that has to be said right. The other thing about the losses is that out of the 32% losses that was reported in 2024, 21% is actually part of the tariff. So there is a regulatory benchmark of 21%. So the losses that are not being paid for is actually the difference between the 32% and the 21%. So I think that has to also be set right. But this issue about meters and the non-calibration of the meters, the truth of the matter is that if the boss of GSA is saying that he knows for a fact that these meters are not being calibrated and that the PURC has actually put in place a regulation, then your colleague was right in putting those questions to the one who is actually in charge of enforcement at Ghana Standard Authority. You have a mandate, you have a legal mandate, and the boss, as I listened to him, said it's legal. There's a regulation which is binding, so it has to be enforced. And for meters, for some time, a couple of years back, for some time now, we were actually assembling some of the meters here. So in terms of enforcement and ensuring that these meters are up to standards, you could walk into these factories and make sure that the meters are up to the standard. So I think it's negligent on their part. But they talked about a lab that has been established. That lab was commissioned in November 2023. So I guess they should be telling us what they've done since that time, because they have the testing facility in place. So what is it that, and to say that you are not involved in the procurement processes, I think is not right. It's your duty, and just as they go to Opera Square to make sure that the wires are compatible, they should be doing these spot checks and be coming up to tell us whether the meters are, because of the lack of calibration, are giving us the accurate measurement or not. I think they have a lot more questions to answer than they are telling us.
We appreciate your time here on Joy News Prime. Well, we'll be back after this quick turn. Please stay tuned in. Well, thanks for staying with us here on Joy News Prime. To other stories now, concerns are emerging over how the Accra Metropolitan Assembly intends to sustain the decongestion of roads in the central business district.
The EMA this morning took to the street of Tudu, Makola, Kantamanto, and in a major crackdown on street encroachment by traders. The exercise comes at the back of the Accra Mayor Michael Akpakpo Alote's earlier announcement of AMA's agenda to bring some sanity to the street, especially in the central business district. James Avaji has a wrap of the day's activity.
You didn't know that this place is also part of the place? Where are you parking to now?
Since almost a hair count, able to answer Saquetri, and see a cost or Edukogu, watch man, Nayakufi.
So you are closing for them?
Almost me and say about Corsi and baby Yakubi. And so move on Cassibet message, so more Cassi to be said as well. Fine.
Will you come back later?
Yes, madam, your best, but say here, and I went to your best, but baby Yakubi.
If you come back, they will come and sack you.
Oh, what's I come out? Mokwas one night, Yakopatch and Omuji to Muday, but back.
Thank you. What are you selling?
Empower Slippers.
She said they've been told to leave the main road, and that's why some of them have decided to put their wares here on the shoulder of the road. But the new instructions to them from the task force now is that even the pavement, the walkway, need to be cleared of every goods. And so she's packing her things back and close for the day. They will go and plead with the task force to know if they'll be allowed back to the place. If they allow them back, they will come back. They will keep coming until they finally settles back again as business as usual. Talk to me. What's the problem? Are you also affected?
Oh, we are not really affected like that. They are just trying to manage us so that we pave way for pedestrians and those who come here to buy. So I think it's a good exercise.
But what do you make about the exercise entirely? Is it a good one you think can bring order to the place?
Yes, it's a good one that will bring order to the place because you are too stubborn. So we need to be regulated like this.
You traders are too stubborn?
Yes.
Meaning you know that coming all the way to the road is a bad thing, but you had no choice than to do it.
Yes, we know what's right, but sometimes we need to be forced to do what's right. So I think it's a good exercise that they are taking place. It's a good exercise.
I'm sure he's one of those ones, that's why he says so. But if they live here and do not come back, will you continue to stay where you are, or you'll be compelled to come back?
Sure, we'll continue to stay where we are. We are not going to come forward again, because I'm sure it's not going to be like previous days. They will be coming always and often. So I'm sure we'll abide by their rules.
But if some of your colleagues decide to shift a bit forward and block your view, will it compel you to come back?
That's one thing that brings problems here. But I'm not sure this time around anyone will try that act again. So I think we'll maintain the light they've given us.
What's your name?
Kwame Asare.
What do you sell?
Slippers.
So this is one of the routes from Cycle Adabraka all the way to Kantamanto and Tudu in the Central Business District. And you can see from the background the road has been clear all the way to Kantamanto.
Well, former board chairman of the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, Professor Christopher Ameyaw-Ekumfi, didn't appear in court for the Accra SkyTrain project trial, citing health issues. His lawyers explained that he had a medical emergency and was taken to the University of Ghana Medical Center's emergency ward. Latif Idris was in court today and has come through this report.
For the second time running in this particular case, Professor Ameyaw-Ekumfi was unable to appear before the court and the judge for that matter. On May 13th, his lawyer told the court that his client was receiving medical attention at the University of Ghana Medical Center. Now, so on that day, his plea was not taken, but the plea of the first accused person, Solomon Asamoah, was taken on the 13th of May. Professor Ameyaw-Ekumfi's plea was scheduled to be taken today, but when they appeared before the judge, his lawyer told the court that they had information about a medical emergency. In fact, he told the court that his client was referred to the emergency ward this particular dawn, and is the reason why Professor Ameyaw-Ekumfi was unable to appear before the court for his plea to be taken in the ongoing SkyTrain matter. Now, the charges brought under against Professor Ameyaw-Ekumfi and Solomon Asamoah is brought under Section 23(1) and Section 1793A of the Criminal Offences Act 1960, Act 29. It stems from a $2 million United States dollar payment made in 2019 to Africa Investor Holdings Limited for the development of an urban SkyTrain system in the national capital of Accra. Now, the $2 million United States dollars, the payment was made, but the SkyTrain system was never executed. The first accused person in this case, that is the former CEO, Solomon Asamoah, who is on a 15 million Ghana cedis bail with 2 sureties, all to be justified with landed property in the national capital of Accra, has not been able to meet or satisfy the bail condition, so he's still in custody. And now, Professor Ameyaw-Ekumfi is also battling for his life at the hospital, as we are told by his lawyers. The case has been adjourned to Monday, May 26th, and is the expectation and the hope of the trial judge that Professor Ameyaw-Ekumfi will be fit to stand trial come next Monday. Latif Idris, Joy News, Court.
Other stories now at Jinlu Basic School in the Northeast Gonja district. Children are learning in classrooms shared with goats with inadequate decks. Now they sit on the bare floor, strained with human and animal waste. One of the classrooms was soaked with blood from a goat, and that goat gave birth just a while ago when school was closed. Well, my colleague Emmanuel Jivenu has that story in our educational series, Crumbling Start.
It's Monday morning here at Jinlo Basic School, but do not mistake this for a livestock farm. This is a classroom block in the northeast Gunja district of the Savannah region.
At times when the padlocks are not there, the ghosts will get access to the classroom. When they get access to the classroom, they will try to defecate around the place and spoil all the classroom. We have water problem. When you're having water problem too, you have to go through by it.
Over the weekend, a goat gave birth inside this very classroom, where children are expected to sit and learn. Blood stains and fresh droppings remain on the bare floor. The classroom is not sanitized. The children only sweep and sit on the bare floor, ready for lessons.
There's many things that comes out of this good physics and lessons, but we've lodged a complaint to the district assembly, hoping that they'll come and help us through it. But they said they'll be coming. That's what they said to us, that they'll be coming to help us. And up to now, we haven't heard from them.
Here, Kindergarten 1 and 2, as well as Primary 1 and 2, all share the same contaminated space. No desk, no chair, just a dusty, dropping, speckled floor.
This is how they sit at. So we just sit down with them. We combine the two classes with them, Nursery 1 and Nursery 2.
The junior high block is no better, a shed with whiteboards awkwardly dividing JHS 1, 2, and 3.
Are you wondering what a natural resource is?
When clouds gather, classes end.
When it rains like this, the following day you can't sit in the class. An animal will occupy here, shit and urinate all over, even on the tables. So you have to wash, dry them before they will pack them aside for lessons.
No renovation has touched these walls. Several high-profile visits have yielded nothing but empty promises.
We were asked to apply for 8-class unit block, for which we did. And we submitted the letter to the DCE, and we were told he has sent it to the appropriate quarters. But up till now, we've not heard anything.
This is Jinlo's crumbling start, where children learn in filth, hope in hardship, and dream amid decay.
I feel that we have been abandoned, so we are appealing to our honorable member of parliament and DCE and any benevolent organization to come in and support us.
The question is, how much longer will these children be forgotten? Emmanuel Jivenu, Joy News, Jinlo, Northeast Gunja District, Savannah Region.